Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us here today for this exciting announcement. I'm Dr. Sandra Davidson. I'm Provost and Vice President Academic for the University of Calgary. And I'd like to start us off in a good way with our territorial acknowledgement that the University of Calgary is located in the heart of southern Alberta, and we both acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. It is also my pleasure this morning to welcome the Honourable Nate Horner, President of Treasury Board and Minister of Finance. We're pleased to have you with us and look forward to hearing from you later in the program. And I'm also pleased to welcome Minister Rajan Sawhney, Minister of Advanced Education and MLA for Calgary Northwest. Minister Sawhney is a University of Calgary alum, and we're very proud of that, having received an MBA and a degree in Economics and Political Science from the University of Calgary. Minister, we're delighted that you're here with us. Thank you. The Government of Alberta has identified labour productivity as the single most important determinant in maintaining and enhancing sustained prosperity for Albertans. Key drivers of labour productivity include skills and human capital, capital investment, and innovation. The University of Calgary has a critical role to play in building and supporting the development of skills and innovation and convening critical conversations to ensure we are driving to this critical societal challenge. The University of Calgary, being Canada's entrepreneurial university, is committed to harnessing the power of research and innovation to tackle society's biggest challenges, including economic growth, diversification, and productivity across Alberta and Canada-wide. We have been the #1 startup creator among Canadian research institutions for 3 years in a row. Last year, the University of Calgary attracted $545 million in external research revenue, and more importantly, a third of that research funding came from nonprofits and industry partners. Through our Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurial Thinking, we have fostered and developed innovation in entrepreneurial thinking across our institution. Our institutional strategy Ahead of Tomorrow, which was just launched last year, includes commitments to embedding entrepreneurial thinking and research opportunities in all student learning, and to build community partners to support this work. This strategy also includes the commitment to increasing access to impactful, future-focused educational programming through a variety of formats and modalities. We continue to develop and deliver innovative programming that anticipates tomorrow's demands and prepares students with the skills necessary to meet the current and future needs of Canada's labour market. As evidence of this, University of Calgary has a 96% graduate employment rate, and 95 of those employed graduates work in jobs that are aligned with their direct programs of study. All of this makes us the perfect partner in supporting the Government of Alberta in focusing on closing Canada's productivity gap. I'll now invite Dr. Trevor Tum, Professor of the University of Calgary's Department of Economics and the Director of Fiscal and Economic Policy at the School of Public Policy, to the podium to share an exciting announcement.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. And I'd like to start by thanking our Provost, Dr. Davidson, for highlighting the valuable work that's being done right across the University of Calgary, and for the kind introduction. And thanks again to everyone for being here this morning to help launch a new initiative that aims to address one of Canada's most pressing economic challenges. That's productivity. And this is not an abstract or theoretical concept. Okay? It's a critical factor that influences everything from our wages, our salaries, investment levels, inflation, the quality of our public services, and our everyday lives. It has far-reaching implications for almost all areas of public policy. And raising productivity does not mean working more for less. Many do have that impression. It makes public communication around the issue of productivity challenging. That doesn't mean that at all. It means getting more for less. It means that each hour we work yields more than it did before. It means higher incomes. And most importantly these days, it means greater purchasing power from that income. Unfortunately, though, Canada's productivity performance has been somewhat disappointing, to say the least. In fact, business sector labor productivity last year fell by 1.8%, marking the third consecutive annual decline in Canada's productivity. And since 2015, labor productivity has increased by only about 1.6%. And for context, that's an increase that we typically saw every year for 20 years previously. It's an annual growth rate over the past 8 years of about 0.2%. I'm an economist, and so I like giving you a lot of these numbers. These numbers, that 0.2%, that's the lowest average growth rate that we have ever seen over any comparable period since records began in 1946. Okay? And we're not just lagging behind our own past performance. We're lagging further and further behind other advanced economies. Today in Canada, we're nearly 30% behind the United States, and that gap is widening. And the economic costs of this are enormous. We know there's a problem. The numbers speak for themselves. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to turn things around? And that's why I'm excited to join you all today to announce that the School of Public Policy will be hosting Canada's Productivity Summit, a 2-day event on October 16th and 17th at the newly expanded BMO Centre. It will be an event that will bring together a diverse set of several hundred scholars, policy practitioners, business leaders, decision makers, and community voices from right across the country. And the goal is to lead a national conversation away from just talking about problems, which is where the conversation is really anchored today, I think it's fair to say, but instead moving us towards identifying real, actionable solutions. So at the summit, we'll explore the latest research, share best practices from business leaders and others, and chart a concrete roadmap for boosting productivity that will unveil in future research through the School of Public Policy. The summit will also be unique in its broad scope and scale, and I think that's necessary since solutions will go beyond any one area of expertise, go beyond any one sector of business or any one government, or indeed go beyond any one silver bullet reform that we might have in mind. Now, hosting such a summit would not be possible without the generous support of the government of Alberta. And so to talk more about that, I'm very pleased to introduce someone who shares our concern around productivity and shares our vision for a national conversation focused on ways to improve. And so please welcome the President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Finance for the Government of Alberta, and the MLA for Drumheller-Stettler, the Honourable Nate Horner.
Thank you, Dr. Tum. Pleasure to be with everybody today. I am pleased to join the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy as they officially announced the Productivity Summit to be held this fall. When I talk to Albertans about what matters most to them, they tell me they're concerned about their ability to provide for their family, including affording food, shelter, and other necessities. They want good-paying job opportunities and an economy that supports all of those needs. In fact, according to a recent Angus Reid poll, 40% of Albertans are facing economic struggles, and 41% say it is difficult to feed their household today. At the center of all of this is productivity. Productivity is about how efficiently and effectively a country's economy is producing goods and services. And it's the key determinant of wages, costs, and other components of increasing standards of living, which is why I'm very proud the Government of Alberta is providing support to this event. I'm increasingly concerned that the ability to meet these priorities is being eroded by Canada's lagging productivity and a lack of actions directed towards sustained long-term prosperity. Canadian productivity has fallen behind competitor nations in recent decades, and the trend is now worsening. Several prominent economists and policymakers have been sounding the alarm, including Carolyn Rogers, the Bank of Canada's own Senior Deputy Governor, who first sounded the alarm, or broke the glass, as she puts it, and it has now been taken up by everyone from the Governor of the Bank of Canada to journalists, academics, and businesses across Canada. While Alberta has the highest productivity in Canada, we're searching for solutions to drive productivity higher so that Albertans can have the wages they need to meet costs and we can limit inflation. In addition, Alberta has been raising this issue with our federal and provincial counterparts for a number of years, and in many ways, we are leading the way by keeping our taxes low, reducing red tape, investing in infrastructure, and supporting skills development. But Alberta can't address this issue alone. Improving productivity requires a concerted effort by the federal government, all provinces and territories, municipalities, industry, and everyone in between. So let me be clear, productivity isn't about getting people to work harder or longer, as Dr. Tum said. It's not about preferential treatment for businesses. Productivity is about finding more efficient and effective ways to produce goods and services, and about producing products and services that are worth more in the marketplace. At its heart, productivity is about maximizing our potential and improving the standard of living for all Canadians. As I said, higher productivity means higher wages. It means lower costs, and it means more investment to grow the economy. This is where the University of Calgary's Productivity Summit comes in. This summit will bring together a diverse group of experts and stakeholders. They will discuss this challenge, share research, and understand global best practices, and in the process start to shape a roadmap for future action. At the same time, we want to encourage Albertans and all Canadians to learn more about this issue by taking part in the summit online. I want to commend the University of Calgary School of Public Policy for hosting this important summit. It's a chance to delve deep into the challenges and complexities surrounding productivity and begin to identify ways we can improve for the benefit of everyone. We have to thoroughly understand the issue before we can move forward on effective and enduring solutions. Because I believe that this summit is of utmost importance to our economic future as a nation, I will be inviting my fellow finance ministers from across Canada, including Minister Freeland, to attend the summit. This isn't political. This is about what we as Canadian policymakers want the future of our economy to be. It's about addressing problems and creating opportunity and prosperity for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. I encourage my counterparts from across the country to commit to having their experts and political leaders attend this important first step in our shared commitment to address this challenge. So again, thank you to the University of Calgary for bringing everyone together. I'm looking forward to this summit this fall and seeing what innovative discussions come out of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Horner, and thank you again to the Government of Alberta for your generous support of this very important summit. And thank you to the School of Public Policy for hosting. I look forward to participating and learning along with many of you, and those that Minister Horner shared will be invited, and the discussions and recommendations that will come from the summit. Thank you, Minister Sani, for also joining us for this exciting announcement. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Minister's Press Secretary, Justin, to manage media. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson. We have a media mic at the back of the room here. If you have any questions, please identify your name and your outlet, and we will go with one question and one follow-up. We'll take a few on the floor, and if there are any on the phone, we'll go ahead, or we'll go there, so please go ahead.
Great. Aaron Toombs, Live Wire Calgary. I'm not sure if this is for Dr. Tum or the Minister. Really, the question is, why now? What was the tipping point that made this a necessity to hold at this point in time?
So that's a great question. So Canada's productivity has always had a challenge. It is not itself a new issue generically, but in normal times we are about 10% behind the United States level of labor productivity. That's where we were in the early 80s, for example. So the widening of the gap today, at the speed that we have seen it widen today, makes this moment uniquely important to redirect our attention towards addressing this issue. So circumstances have rapidly changed, and that means it's important to know why and what we can do about it.
Dr. Tum, what's the state of the research into this area, and how important is it to disseminate that research to business leaders to policymakers to the people who are really going to be implementing any kind of changes?
Yeah, great questions. We have a lot of insight already from past research that is done in lots of areas, from tax policy to trade policy and what have you. And so part of the summit will be bringing out ideas that are themselves not new, but perhaps thought of in different ways that reflect the current moment. But there are other challenges that we face that are relatively unique. Think about inflation. We have seen inflation at the levels that we saw it peak to in 2022 before, but not since the 1950s have we seen it accelerate as quickly as we have. And so there's scope for new and novel research insight to be applied to the current moment to better understand why we're in the circumstance that we're in.
Great. Next question.
Chris Brown, Cross Border Network. This is for the Minister and the Doctor, if possible. Minister, you talked about how this is not just a provincial priority, it needs to be a federal and a municipal one. As I have a lot of listeners and readers who are municipal focused, what role does the municipalities play in increasing productivity across Alberta and across Canada?
Well, I think it is a challenge that will need to be addressed at every level of government. If you look at regulation specifically, we've lived in silos a lot in the past. We do need to all pull the same direction. A lot of that can be around permitting, I guess, around municipal jurisdiction, and just increasing timeliness brings more cost certainty, less risk to investors, speeds it up and does increase productivity and keep costs down. That would be one example. But it is very important that we all come to the table, don't work in silos, and address this together.
Does the Doctor have anything to add to that?
Sure, maybe just quickly by noting that Canada is one of the most decentralized countries in the world. We do not just have one government, we have thousands of governments. And part of our productivity challenge is ensuring that these governments, as the minister put it, don't operate in silos. Just simple differences in rules, regulations, standards, and certifications creates real friction to the national economy in Canada. So that would be interprovincial trade costs. And so municipalities, provinces, each play a role in helping overcome that and other challenges.
Now, sticking with you, Doctor, if possible, symposium is not going to be until October. So we're potentially not going to see any changes until the new year. Is that too long of a time? Is this too long of a time when you're talking about things that we need to do 2 years ago, a year ago, and we're not going to potentially see any changes until 2025, 2026?
Well, from the organizational perspective, 2.5 months is going to go by really quickly, I promise you that. But it is important to ensure that the insights and recommendations that we put forward are well thought through and reflect the reality on the ground for businesses, reflect the latest research insight from academia and elsewhere. And so getting it right is more important than rolling something out quickly and potentially making the situation worse.
Good morning. This is for Minister Horner. Phoenix from City News. Sir, this is just a little off topic. This is about yesterday's Green Line announcement, the city announcing a $700 million overrun. It was mentioned by the Premier that we have a cost and that's pretty much it. Now with this new news, is the government, or how is the government responding to the announcement of this overrun affected by the city?
Well, I think I would stand behind the comments of the Premier and I believe the Transportation Minister as well. Obviously, this is very fresh, so it's not like it's been something that's been across our desk. But I believe even the federal government's been clear that if there's a scope change, it would need to be reapplied and reassessed. So early days, but it hasn't crossed my desk yet.
Thanks, sir.
You have a follow-up, Phoenix?
No, let's go ahead.
Okay. Next question.
So I'm intrigued by the format of this conference with finance ministers being invited as well as the federal finance minister. How do you prevent this from just turning into a grouse fest by finance ministers at the federal finance ministers when you've come to discuss productivity?
I don't think that's going to be a problem at all, honestly, Kelly. One thing that was evident to me, I haven't had this job long, but there's a real desire from the finance ministers, the provincial finance ministers, to not just get into our FPT meetings and fight over how we chop up the pie, but a real desire to talk about how we grow the pie. So I think that our intentions are very are very pure in that sense. I do hope Minister Freeland comes. We sent a letter out, I believe, yesterday, and I did already invite all of the provincial finance ministers at our last FPT call. So I'm hoping that they show up, but no intention to turn this into anything other than productive. I think we need awareness for the issue. We need to use language that resonates with Albertans and Canadians about why it's important, and then we need to come up with some solutions. It was clear to me, we were met with the Bank of Canada governor in December when we had our meetings in Toronto, and this is top of mind for him and that institution. So everybody's talking about it. No one's really putting forward any solutions or applicable policy changes yet, and that's what this is about.
And for Minister Horner or Dr. Tum, I'm just wondering, when we talk about quality of life, in the past we've talked about that in regards to wages, but now there's this big gap between wages and housing costs that many people are concerned about. How do you plan to address that in this conference?
Yeah, I think it'll come up pretty naturally as one of the many factors of increasing costs of living. And when I speak about making this relevant to Albertans and Canadians, I think that's what we're talking about. You can't have wage growth without investment attraction into this country and this province and increased productivity. So it all ties together. I know housing is front of mind for many across the country, including Albertans, but it'll be a large part of the conversation.
Dr. Tum, do you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Good morning, Minister. Kyle Bax with CBC. I just wanted to ask how you would describe the level of investment in the province right now, and then also specifically when it comes to data centers, why that has become one of the priority areas for the government.
Well, I'd say the data center conversation is more of a priority for that industry. We're seeing that happen across North America and the world with the changes to AI recently. It's very important to our government, I would say, to get that right, just because I would say we already have challenges with our electrical system in this province, so a real balance of how we allow that sector to grow without growing it on the backs of the ratepayers, and understanding what the benefits are to the taxpayers of the province. And we've seen that internationally. I think Ireland's made some changes. You really need to get an understanding of what the return on investment would be for the province. So I'd say it's important to us to get it right. So that's kind of why we're digging into it.
You have a follow-up, Kyle? Thank you. That with all the questions on the floor, we'll go to the phones. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
There are no questions at this time.
Thank you. That concludes our Q&A.
Well, seems let us off easy. Well, thank you, everyone.